Honor and privilege to welcome all of you to the session on Save Water, Save Life. I welcome all distinguished speakers of the session who are here with us today. I request our moderator, Mr. George Rajkumar, Country President, Rainforest India, to initiate the session. Thank you.
Is it audible? Yes. Good morning, all. Good morning. Can we have some response? Good morning. Good morning. Going to be good afternoon. Okay. Thanks. Thank you, Seema and CII, for giving this opportunity. I pleasure to moderate this session. Okay. Save water and save life. How important and powerful statement is it? Okay. It's this itself, statement itself, it shows that how water is important to the life of the human being. Yes, water is a finite element. Okay, it is really required for human well-being. So that this session is really important for us to discuss. We have an eminent panelist here. We are all in next 45 minutes. We are going to discuss about what are the things happening in India, how we are securing the water security in India, then what industries are playing their role, and maybe a couple of people will talk about some of the business models, what they are planning to do here in India. Before getting into the details, then I will introduce the panelist, Mr. Ajit. He is a candidate for Water Resource Group World Bank. Thank you, Ajit, for being part of this session. And Mr. Madhavan, Chief Executive Water Aid. Thank you, Madhavan. And Chandrakant Kambani is Vice President and Head of Programs of Ambuja Cements. And Mr. Ganges Reddy, Mr. Gangadharan, to Ganges Reddy. So how significant it is related to our the grand body of the country. He's heading CEO of Blue Drop Enduro Private Limited. These are the panelists of the session. The program, the flow of the program is that we set the context. Then I will hand over the floor to panelists. They will be sharing their views and thoughts for 5 to 6 minutes each. Then there are a set of questions which will be asked to them. And we will come back to the audience. If you have any questions, please you can throw it to us. Then that is the end of the event. We will conclude. Okay, just to set the context, as I said, water is the finite element, and it is really fundamental for human well-being. Okay, it's the only substance which can't be replaced. So far, we have not found any replacement for the water. Water can pose a serious challenges to sustainable developments, but at the same time, if it is managed well and efficiently and equitably, then water can play a leading role in strengthening the economic and the social reforms of the country. Also, as per the recent report of SDG 6, okay, the world is off the track of its real goal, what has already been set for providing the water and sanitation to the entire world by 2030, completely off the track. So also the report says we need to do it 4 times faster than what we have done, because we have not done for the last 4-5 years. Then we need to catch up. So we need to do it more faster than what initiatives we need to take. The water challenge, or the challenge of water security, is growing globally. So we have left with only less than 1% of fresh, safe water for human consumption. Also, every year, 200,000 of people are dying in India. That's what Niti Aayog report says, because of inadequate access to the safe drinking water. Also, at the same time, if you say the climate challenges are really imposing pressure on how we need to reform the water sources. We say the climate challenge is a shark and water is the teeth. It's a universal global statement, but still how important the water it is. The water is really renewable if it is really managed well. If you see at least in India, there is no dearth of water sources. We are scarce. It's a question of how well we are managing it. That is what we are going to discuss today in the panel discussion. So there is always already a mismanagement of water. additionally in India, because we are using almost 70 to 80% of the water for the agriculture. Even 10% the savings which we can bring from the agriculture sector alone, it's going to provide the water for the entire community in India. The second is the excess extraction of the groundwater. How do we prevent that? How do we prevent the excess extraction? So for providing that, we need to reuse. There should be compensation for the extraction. So that is why we need to reuse the water, multiple time use. We need to do that. And also there are a lot of losses in the distributions. Across India, the water is being transported across the pipelines, and due to excess pressure, there is lots of amount of leak. So it measures around 40% of the water is being wasted. It's a NRW, non-resource water. So this 40% is being leaked because of the pipeline leakages. Then at the same time, when climate challenges impact, well, there's an imbalance of the rainfall and whatever we are emitting, the carbon dioxide, it is impacting the monsoon seasons, and we are not getting the unplanned rain as we planned for. So these are the points we are going to discuss. This discussion within the 45 minutes, we are not going to conclude anything. It's only a start. As we are the responsible citizens of the country, we wanted to leave out the better living world to the next generations. So this is a time for us to act now. This is a time for us to create a sense of urgency. And this is why we have the discussions like this are happening. So now what we do, we will hand it over to the panelists. They will be sharing their thoughts and views about how to save and save the life of the people by saving the water. So first I will request Mr. Ajit to share his views and thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you, George. Welcome to also to fellow panelists. I think this is not a topic that we are new to. In fact, water has been a major topic in most of the global discussions that's happening now. It's also, we are just fresh from the Stockholm Water Week that just happened 2 weeks ago. So the priority that the world has given to water has been kind of on the rise when it comes to development issues, when it comes to geopolitical conflicts, and when it comes to daily management challenges that we see on a day-to-day basis. Now, where we have some opportunities, and also George did outline some of them, including water reuse, including better water management in agriculture, which consumes almost 85% of the water that we have on a day-to-day basis. There are opportunities out there. There is also a need for innovation in certain areas. So I think the agriculture sector, the industrial sector, there are lots of other development sectors or subsectors that are looking at technology innovations right now that can help the sector achieve better efficiencies. Now, with agriculture, I think one of the main paradigms that we've been kind of grappling with is to look at efficiency. And George did mention that we need to increase the water use efficiency. I think we have one of the lowest water use efficiencies globally. We haven't crossed 40% on average, and there are states that have crossed that. There are also states that are very kind of like not at the lowest or the bottom. We have states like Uttar Pradesh, which is huge, which is the top ranking producer in agriculture, but still have less than 1.5% of the total area under irrigation, the net irrigated area, which is covered by micro irrigation. So there's a huge potential out there if you're looking at big states like Uttar Pradesh that can make a change in terms of adopting new technologies and achieving that efficiency. Now, where we see this opportunity is in two dimensions. One, that we need to see it from the urban water continuum, urban-rural continuum. And secondly, in the rural space where we can increase the water use efficiencies. So from our perspective, from the World Bank's perspective, and also the Water Resource Group's perspective, which we manage, this is about creating partnerships at the local level, at the district level, at the state level, and helping the government catalyze the work that they're already doing. So we have set up multi-stakeholder platforms in the states which are headed by the chief secretaries with all the line departments, which actually help break silos and help the government implement schemes at scale and at a faster rate. I think this is one of the limiting factors when it comes to implementation of programs at the district level or the state level, where we still have monies coming into different silos and actions happening in different silos. So the multi-stakeholder platform is a prime example, which has worked in Karnataka for the past 10 years. It has been quite successful. It has implemented one of the largest micro irrigation programs in the world, covering almost 100,000 hectares in automated micro irrigation, bringing enough benefits to the farmers and for the government. We have been able to save almost 3 trillion metric cube of water, meters of water over the past 2 years. So that itself is kind of sufficient to give water security to households at scale. In UP again, we are trying to look at a new model which looks at setting up a special purpose vehicle that would increase the water use efficiency at the farm level with the government investment, with the private sector investments, and focusing on mechanization. So I think to work with the government, with the private sector, with the civil society is the mantra. And this is not a new one. It's something, it's a no-brainer. The fact is that when you get these partnerships work on the ground, that's where the rubber hits the road. And I think that's where we would also need to think about what innovations can help operationalize partnerships at the district level and at the state level, which is where the action happens. And once you're able to mobilize and generate these partnerships and work with the government, where there is already a trust deficit, I think that these kind of measures in terms of working on a daily basis with the government, with the farmers, creating impacts at scale, if you are able to generate a model at a replicable scale, that's where the success lies. And I think in case of wastewater reuse, in case of agri-water use efficiency, this is something that we see. In Maharashtra, we have initiated wastewater reuse with the city administrations and working with the farmers, where the farmers are directly paying the city administrations for the water they use. So I think it's a revenue model that is being created. And the cities also need to be incentivized because they are making an investment in terms of infrastructure, which needs to be paid back. And at the end of the day, it's all business or it all depends on the economics. If a better economic model is out there, then that wins. So in the case of wastewater reuse, we need to invent around financial models, technological innovations that would make it cheaper and also more acceptable for farmers. And primarily, this would be the last point. I think we'll also need to focus on. We've been kind of implementing irrigation large-scale programs around for I think more than a couple of decades now. But what we haven't done is to also promote irrigation extension because the farmers still do not know kind of what's the amount of water that needs to be put into the crop. And still there is overuse or otherwise the system itself is creating enough inefficiencies in the system that would disincentivize farmers to save and use water effectively. So I think that irrigation extension, whether it comes from the private sector or from the public sector, is key for behavioral change that needs to happen at the local level.
Thank you, Ajit. You have touched upon a very important point of irrigation extension. We will come back to you with the question also. Thanks for the topics of water use efficiencies, also how ownership and multi-stakeholder involvement is required for benefiting. Thank you. Thanks, Ajit. And now we will move to Mr. Madhavan. Then maybe you can share your thoughts.
Thank you. So I'm going to try and build on what George and Ajit have already talked about. I think the problem of our excessive dependence on groundwater and the fact that we're running out of groundwater, I think has been very well made already. I'm going to try and put the spotlight on three other issues that I feel we should be taking serious cognizance of. The first is the obvious one of climate change and the fact that our infrastructure is not climate resilient at this point of time. Whether it's Bangalore floods recently, or whether it's floods in Assam a few months earlier, what Mumbai has gone through in the last decade, what Chennai has gone through in the last decade, shortages of water in Shimla are all indicative of a growing crisis with regard to climate change and its impact on the ability of the system to provide services on an assured basis. Now, some of this has to do with urban planning and design. Some of it has to do simply with imagination. The fact is that our cities are designed to repel water. The cities are not designed to absorb the water that falls in them. And so when you have adverse climate events where you're getting excess amount of rainfall that was unanticipated in a very short span of time, the infrastructure was never designed to manage those large quantities of water. To make it worse, a large number of our cities have always had traditional water bodies. A good example of that is Chennai, from where George lives. And a very large proportion of water bodies in Chennai actually acted as sinks. So when there was excess rainfall, when there was flooding, these water bodies played the role of actually flood control. The same is true in the case of Bangalore as well, which is that Bangalore had very large proportion of traditional water bodies. Drainage channels that allowed for excess water to flow into these water bodies have either been encroached on or filled with waste. As a consequence of which, these water bodies also then can't play the role that they have to. So in some sense, it's a question of starting to re-question the way we are planning and designing our urban spaces, and then to look at the role of water bodies and the role that they play in actually handling these shocks to the system. I think the second problem that we need to recognize is the growing problem of water quality. In a different context, Ajit talked about the trust deficit. This trust deficit is not, is very clear if you look at water quality. The fact of the matter is that all of us live in large cities where the municipality is sourcing water, is treating it, is delivering it at our household level. And yet we choose purification systems that very often are not even required, simply because we don't trust the ability of the government to provide us with safe drinking water. If you were to actually look at the market for packaged water in this country, it's one of the fastest growing markets. And the reason for it is simply because of this trust deficit. We doubt the ability of the state to provide us with safe drinking water. Now, today, any of us in this room could possibly use a mobile phone app or the internet, order a blood or stool test or a pathology test, have someone come collect the sample at our home and deliver the results to us by WhatsApp or email by the evening. You can't imagine doing this to get your water quality tested. So in some sense, there is a huge opportunity that exists, which is that today we don't have democratic access to water quality testing facilities. And since access to water quality testing is not easy, as a consequence, those who can afford it are choosing to buy purification systems without even worrying about what the quality of water is. So you end up between a mismatch between actually the quality of water and the purification system, simply because we don't have the ability to get our water quality tested reliably. In addition to bacterial contamination, which there's very little information available on, we all assume that there is going to be bacterial contamination. But if you look at government data, there's very poor data available about the extent of bacterial contamination. More is known about chemical contamination. We're still dealing with challenges of arsenic, fluoride, salinity, increasing nitrates now, particularly around in Uttar Pradesh, parts of the Malwa region in Madhya Pradesh, where over a period of time, fertilizer, pesticide use has led to all of this now leaching and finding its way into water bodies. So we're seeing a high nitrate load. We also now started to talk openly about uranium in Punjab, which has been sort of something that's not been talked about for over 3 decades, but now there's more evidence available in the public domain about this growing problem. So water quality is likely to remain a major crisis for us moving forward. The third is fundamentally about pricing of water. If you do not value water, you will have no incentives to conserve it or to use it judiciously. And the reality today is that we're all beneficiaries of hugely subsidized water. And the absence of looking at pricing and ensuring that consumers of water know the true value of water, we're creating a problem on a massive scale. Now, today, if agriculture uses groundwater to such an extent, some of it has to do with the fact that groundwater is free. In many cases, electricity to pump that groundwater is free as well or subsidized. Now, we're going to see the same thing happening in our urban areas where, so there's a study done by the World Resources Institute, which, for example, demonstrated that depending on whether you had access to municipal water supply or not, cost that you spent on accessing water increased tremendously. So in Bengaluru, they found, for example, that settlements which were not linked to municipal pipe water supply, families there spent 12 times what someone who had access to a pipe water connection was paying. In parts of Mumbai, it has went up to 24 times. So in some sense, there is an inequity that is also exists in our cities in terms of do you have access to municipal water supply or not? And you also benefit from that subsidized water. In the absence of that, people are either buying water from tankers or they're buying water elsewhere and incurring huge costs in doing that. So in some sense, we have to get our water pricing right. I'm going to just end with two small other issues, which is one is to do with the fact that it is ironic that today there is not a single city in India which has 24/7 water supply. Not one city in India. There are parts of cities which have 24/7 water supply, but there is not a single city in India which has assured 24/7 water supply today. And that's one of the tragedies of our time. We're all starting to recognize that increasingly India is going to become more urban than it's ever been. And the fact is that we don't have the ability to provide assured, safe drinking water to families that reside in our cities today. And in the absence of that, what's going to happen is that families who can afford to bore a well are going to have become producers of water. They're going to have their own private source of water. Those who can afford to buy purification systems are going to be ensure that they have adequate water quality. But those who can't, so in some sense, there is a need for us to start to look at utilities in our urban context. Look at whether these utilities have the skills, the capacities, and have the financial viability to be able to assure citizens in a growing urban India access to water 24/7. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Madhavan, for your strong and powerful statements. So you touched upon urban planning, especially you talked about the city of Chennai. If you see the statistics, in the past, Chennai had 144 water bodies. But today, only 48 have been restored. We don't know what has happened to the rest. Not only that, before coming inside, then I was discussing with Ganges, then see, we are focusing on even the government is pushing on for putting money for regeneration of the water bodies. We are only looking into the peripheries. They are de-slipping and de-weeding and beautification of the water bodies. And we are not talking about how do we store and how do we, as he was saying, then a few months after, if you regenerate, then it will become a cricket ground. And once the cricket ground is there, after a few years, it will become the building. So that is what is happening because we are stopping the passage of the water into that water body and also even the sewage line. So we need to think about how do we naturally we need to treat and to get the water into the water body. Only thing, water body will stay as a water body. Otherwise, it will become a ground. Okay. Also, thanks for touching on the water quality. Yes, last week we had a event in Copenhagen, IWA. There are thousands of startups. Okay, people are incubating the startups. The car industries are incubating them. So they work mainly on sensing the water quality of water. So since you touched upon, there is a threat on the quality of water, but there are things are happening. Thousands of people are working on how do we do the online sensing of the water so that like how the pathology labs are offering, even the water quality also can be offered online. Okay. Also, same way that we have talked about the pricing. There was a session from organized by the Danish Embassy in Denmark about the pricing of water. You see that because there are plenty of groundwater available in Denmark. Okay. So the processing of the water, providing a 24/7 pipeline supply to them, it costs Indian rupees, 700 rupees per cubic meter of water. But here in India, if you compare, it is more than 2.5 times at present. Okay. Having said that, yes, thanks for sharing your thoughts. Now we will move to Mr. Chandrakant. Okay, he's from Ambuja Cements. Ambuja Cements is already ahead of the curve. Okay, almost 5.5 times water positive. That's what they declared. So let's hear from Chandrakant. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. George and Mr. Ajit and Mr. Madhavan has beautifully laid out the possibility how we can reverse the situation, what are the opportunity ahead in different aspect of the water. I would like to add few of my observation or learnings over a period of last almost 2 decades now. I think we keep hearing about reduce, reuse, recycle, 3R of water and 3R of waste. I would like to say I think it's high time to add one more R, and that is respect. I think there is a I need to uh, put respect to this finite resource, which shows at one point of time. I think if you go to the history and especially in the rural area, the kind of respect water was receiving, I think it is situation has changed over a period of time. And if we start giving that respect to this water and build around that, it would be very important going forward for reversing the situation or securing our water future for our country. One of the important aspect how this respect can be made possible, I would add one point around it is water literacy. I think we talk about literacy of everything, but I think there is hardly anything on water literacy or even in our education system or for that matter in other way around. I think there is a high need to build water literacy kind of theme all across stakeholder to do this kind of literacy in terms of efficient use of water as well as giving that kind of attention to the water. In addition to that, I think Ajit touched upon and Mr. Madhavan mentioned about the water use and groundwater, especially and groundwater quality. I think this is something which need greater attention. I think agriculture being largest consumer of water, and if we can bring efficiency, and there are I think proven model in the country which need to be scaled in terms of how we can better use water in the agriculture and increase the efficiency of water use so that we can have we can even produce more from the same resources available resources so that and have a better balance of water and there are many levels of water use efficiency when it comes to agriculture whether it is introduction of technology like micro irrigation or educating farmer to use water efficiently or when to irrigate and all that. So I think there are a couple of things which will which if we can do at a scale would be very useful in terms of contributing positively into this scenario. And the last part, I think what's more important is if whatever we do, wherever we do, I think it's all about collective action of the community where we are working. And if we do that through a collaborative approach, I think we will be able to do the greater job in terms of reversing situation. And so collaboration, and when I say collaboration, I think partnership among different stakeholder and putting community at center and considering issues like climate change into the program strategy or a development strategy of a particular area when it comes to water. I think that would give the required impetus, required action for changing the scenario wherever we will be planning or will be working. As different area has different issues and community has that experience of how situation turns over a period of time. Will be very important to understand as a outsider. Outsider can act as a catalyzer, but they have to build around the experience of the community, experience of the key stakeholder into the community. So thank you, and I was here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chandrakant, for reinstating the respect to the infinite element. Thank you. We're running out of time. Can you please share your thoughts quickly then before we go for the questions?
Thank you. Sisters and brothers, thank you for the valuable thoughts shared by my co-panelists. Say water is the theme of the session. It directly relates to one thing, water security. And water security directly relates to what But as he has said before, water quality. It's not that there's no water. There's a lot of water all around us. They say water, water everywhere, but there's no water. It's just the quality of the water that determines the water security of the country today and for the citizens. I don't know about the Private Limited based out of Hyderabad. We work on nature-based solutions to rejuvenate the misused or used wastewater. So we build sewage treatment plants and effluent treatment plants using nature-based solutions all across the country. Thanks to Danish Embassy for inviting us here and my partners in Denmark. There has been heavy emphasis on rainwater harvesting, recycling of water and things like that. We see the water forms, basically have the rainwater, or the groundwater, the surface water, and then the major component today, the wastewater. A lot of us merely use the water that is coming out to our homes, but we don't know what is happening after we use the water. Majority of the times, this water flows down into campuses, into the sewage treatment plants, doesn't get treated well, further flows into nalas, then ends up in water bodies, spoiling the entire cities and even urban, semi-rural, peri-urban areas. Wherever we go, it's a common denominator. Delhi has SZs, but it also has a lot of SOZs, like every other city. What is SOZ? Special order zones. Where in the city you find where nala is flowing, where is water body, what is happening around. This is the state of the affairs, and indoor water is safe today. So, very vital points Madhavji has raised. The need for all of us to join hands is to look at a holistic approach to how do we tie all these things down and at what level we all can participate in the work, whether as a citizen or a policymaker or a solution provider activists. Thanks to CII for bringing people together on this forum, connecting the dots and taking things forward. A very important fact today we're talking about climate change. I've asked you to speak about what is the impact of climate change on the world product, which is wastewater treatment. Surprisingly, the fact came out in study that there is not climate change affecting the wastewater treatment. Wastewater treatment systems are the sixth largest contributor to the climate change today. The amount of carbon that we're losing, the kind of methane that we get released in this treatment processes, they're affecting climate change big time. Everything else is going for a toss. So there is a need to look at solutions that are coming to the marketplace, whether they are sustainable, whether they are different. What is the psychological impact of this whole thing? So with that, a few thoughts. We will look for a further discussion and share more.
Thank you. Thank you. And just since you're stressed on time, maybe quickly go to a round of questions to all of the panelists. Maybe you can, in 2 minutes, if you can conclude your answers, it will be better. Ajit, you are working with World Bank on Water Resource Group. Can you please share what are 2030 water groups vision and what are the plans to scaling of water efficient technologies in India?
Sure. Thanks. I'll try and keep it within 2 minutes. So basically, the idea is to work with the state governments and also the national government in partnership with the private sector and the civil society. Now, civil society to us is a broader definition that includes both the NGOs and the academic institutions and think tanks. And what we do is to create these institutions which are legal or have a legal backing from the government in terms of withstanding political changes, and create incentives by catalyzing studies, technical assessments. One thing that I guess maybe as the panel here missed out is also the fact that we are looking at a situation where we don't have good quality data on the ground for making any of these initiatives to begin with. So what we are trying to do is to create all those things that we talked about here: groundwater quality, water security, water issues, access, and most of these things. And the trust deficit that we talked about is stemming out of that. Today, if you go to the government or to the private sector or the civil society and tell them that we are going to do a project on something, we do not have a strong baseline to begin with. So that issue becomes the kind of a legacy issue that gets carried into different projects, derails some of the investments, and then helps kind of systemic issues crop there. So what we are trying to do is to kind of create that incentive for the government to work on a scientific basis on policies, create the data points for the government to initiate actions, design better programs, target, prioritize, and help channel investments. Now, investments, not just government investments, it's also the private sector investments. Wherever we work with the governments, and as professionals, you all would have met with this experience many times in your professional career. When you talk to the governments, when you talk to most of the administrations, it's not the money that's a constraint. It's actually a replicable model and implementation experience that the government is looking for. And most discussions actually converge at that point that the money comes to the government, it rests with some department, and then implementation happens in some other departments. So one classic example is the case of micro irrigation in the country. Most of the money that is targeted or earmarked under the PMKSY comes with the horticulture department, whereas in a state like Uttar Pradesh, which has got a large area under sugarcane, and the sugarcane commissioner has got an annual demand of 50,000 hectares under micro irrigation, the money doesn't reach him because the money rests with the horticulture department and it's used for some other crops. So I think where the water guzzler crops are in the country or in the state do not get the attention from the policies because the prioritization is happening in a different set format. And that is what we would want to address. And that would happen if the government, this doesn't mean that it's something that we have invented out here. We are trying to create a system that would enable different parties to talk to each other more frequently and also more responsibly so that there is better transparency and accountability in the way that we work on the ground. So that is the kind of change that we are trying to do and to bring about.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ajit. Yeah, I will go to Mr. Madhavan. You are thickly working with the Jal Jeevan Mission. So what are policy changes identified by Water Aid which we can implement in India to address the quality and equity of water?
So I think it's important for everyone in this room to be clear about the fact that Jal Jeevan Mission seeks to ensure that every rural household has access to water delivered through a functional household tap connection in their household. It is unparalleled. Both the investment and the ambition are unparalleled. George, you talked about SDGs and the fact that we're lagging behind. If India were to ensure that every household has access to safe, assured drinking water by 2024, which is the ambition, we're likely to shift the global indicators with regard to SDG 6 simply because of the size of our population. I think there are two things that we have to be very clear about. For this to succeed, one, we need to be sure that the source of water is sustainable. Laying the pipes is easy. Ensuring that you have safe water flowing consistently through the pipes is a different challenge. And so in some sense, ensuring source sustainability is our first challenge. The second is to ensure that we have decentralized operation and maintenance systems where communities have a sense of ownership and are able to operate and maintain these systems. It is not going to be possible for this to be centrally managed like it has been in the past. The success of Jal Jeevan Mission will depend on being able to allow women, communities to take ownership over this program and to manage them in a sustainable way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Go to Mr. Chandrakant. As I said, Ambuja Cement is already on ahead of the curve. Maybe you can share your views on how you are working with the communities locally, so to develop or reduce the water crisis in the rural area.
Thank you. So, at Ambuja Cement, I think CSRM Ambuja Cement Foundation is taking care of all this program, and especially the water program is evolved over a period of last 30 years. So, foundation started working in 1993, and the very first program which was started in Gujarat was water. So I think our program evolved over a period of time in terms of understanding the community, understanding the local context. We started with, let's say, water harvesting. We immediately realized that it's not only harvesting, but we have to focus on the core issues like drinking water, issues of water use in agriculture. So we have ended aware of how we can bring water use efficiency in agriculture. And finally, as I mentioned, I think we have started focusing more on more building water literacy in the different stakeholders. So over a period of time, so wherever we work, we are focused on a long-term horizon. I think we can't fix this problem by simply working on a project for 2 year, 3 year time. So it's require a long-term perspective, long-term investment, and long-term vision for changing the scenario or the crisis scenario which wherever we start working. So I think it is important to understand that the situation where we are is a result of so many years of action or inaction or bad actions, whatever we say. So you have to have long-term perspective to invest that also in terms of investment, in terms of building respect around the resource, in terms of water literacy and I think what is important from the perspective of the rural area, I think how we can build a collective action to so that it continue and sustain over a period of time. So I think it is a perspective, it's a journey one is to take wherever it want to do it, and I think results are fantastic in terms of when we work long term in the community with the community action. I think situation will change as per the strategy, whatever strategy suits for a particular area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We talked about water bodies and how to regenerate the water bodies. Since your organization is working on that concept, maybe quick remark on
Absolutely.
what can be done effectively and efficiently.
Thank you for pointing this water body issue that, a lot of water bodies I visited were resonated. Resolution is create nice bunks, eco-friendly walkways, solar lights, and some benches. The water body is resonated. What are we talking water? Resolution. Those two components are gone. One resolution is done. This is what the situation is. So we are on a mission to resonate water bodies in the next 3 years. Every city has water bodies that are polluted. The moment you try to stop sewage coming into the water body, now you don't have separate sewage lines and stormwater lines. You stop both. Actually, they become dry within a short period of time. They become crane grounds. They will encroach. This is what the story everywhere. So it is time for us to introduce technologies where when the sea is flowing into the water body, we have to find methods to regulate the water in the water body and the food web that is already present in the wastewater. So we are doing that work. The idea is to let every water body have a share of sewage water coming in, which is always happening. If you're able to treat each water body 100, 200, 300, your load on the city will go down. You're spending about 2 crore rupees to build a STP, 1 STP. The same money can be thrown into the water body, regulate the water body, create very high quality water with the kind of technologies that are available. At the same time, protect everything else, the ecosystem in the water body.
Thank you. Thank you. The organizers are staring at me, so I need to close. So any good discussion come to an end. So we need to conclude because whatever we discuss in the 45 minutes may not be enough. Correct. We have only shared a few thoughts what can be done better. Okay. The only thing is I wanted to say before we conclude, the enough of awareness we have already given. We have already given awareness to the society. It's enough. It's a time to act now. Sorry, sir. You want?
No problem. I just wanted to ask, what is, we have been doing a lot of work. What do you see as the most important things are missing in our plans and policies?
If you allow me to comment,
Say the country, of course, local, we can say anything, but in the policy framework in the country, what do you think is missing?
the only point what is missing, sir. Yeah, I understand the governance. The governance is missing. We have enough money. People are taking action. There are plans in place. We need to. The people who are owning plans have to govern well. That is what it's important to implement. We have very good action plans. But only thing is,
If you permit, I will say,
it's okay.
can you permit 1 minute?
Yeah.
Now, I mean, mostly the water supply engineering and all this stuff is from the Indian stream. All our Jal Board and many other such like organizations or even irrigation is manned by civil engineers and all that stuff, or engineers. This governance, water governance issue is absolutely alien for them. This is my feeling. Those who are dealing with it, they have no understanding of governance with reference to water. They may know governance in their office, governance in their project, but water governance, I somehow know a little.
Thank you. You got your point, sir, but this is not the forum to discuss about governance.
No.
Yes,
Because you said it, something needs to be done about it.
yes, we need to do it. It's okay. So we need to conclude because
Okay.
the panelists for other session are waiting. So thank you very much for listening to us. Thank you, panelists, for joining here and sharing your thoughts. So now we need to, at least whatever the takeaways are, then we need to go back and put it into action. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers. I would request distinguished speakers to kindly gather for the group photograph.